Hi, this is Caroline from The Happy Sensitive. In this video, I wanted to chat with you a little bit about what it means to be a highly sensitive sensation seeker. Now, highly sensitive sensation seekers are a rare kind of highly sensitive people. When you're a sensation seeker and you're highly sensitive, you're always on this brink between, walking this narrow path between overstimulation and being really bored. And so it's a bit of a tough package to have, because if you only have high sensitivity, then you can always manage stuff by just doing less and slowing down and just kind of like taking away a lot of the stimulation. But if you're a sensation seeker, you also really crave novel experiences and adventures. And it doesn't have to be skydiving, but you have this need to explore and try new things. But the problem is that all the new things that you try are also going to potentially overstimulate you because they're new things. So you're always kind of trying to manage that, like, is it too much, is it too little? And it's really hard to understand what that is. And I know for me, I'm a highly sensitive sensation seeker, that for a long time I didn't really understand what it was, and it was really hard for me to kind of explain to people what I was like, because people who knew me from work would see me as a very introverted, very focused person. But then people who knew me from parties were like, she's super extroverted, she talks to everyone, right? And so it was like these two different kinds of people. And the people who knew me from parties and from, just doing things, going traveling, trying new things, they saw me as a totally different person than the people who knew me from work or knew me from my studies. So that's often the experience I hear from people who are highly sensitive sensation seekers, is that a lot of people around them don't really understand that they are both. And so when you're needing some downtime and needing some rest time, the people who are used to you being outgoing and adventurous are like, what's wrong with you? Are you depressed? Like, why are you suddenly hiding away from the world? Like, come out of your shell, And the people who are used to you being introverted and just, I guess just being introverted more and not being very outgoing and just being focused on one thing, or just being kind of in a low stimulation mode, those people are going to think, well, what happened to her? She's suddenly very bubbly and outgoing. Like, what's wrong with her? Like, why is she acting so weird and almost like manic in comparison, right? But it's not manic. It's because you have both. Like, you have this need to try new things, meet new people, go new places, but you also have a need to not be overstimulated and have that inner quiet, and you get more stimulated more quickly. So those adventures that you crave, those things you want to do, they're going to be a problem for you more easily than for other people. And that can be really painful. And so a lot of highly sensitive sensation seekers, they have these massive crashes, like these massive highs and lows, because they try to do all the things that they want to do, but then inevitably they crash and they need time to recover and to kind of gather themselves because they just got overstimulated. And, so they go through these really like busy, creative, outgoing periods, and then they go into what looks like depression. To other people, it looks like depression, but for them, it's just like this sense of like, I just need to kind of stay at home for a bit and not do too much and just kind of slow down. And it's really frustrating when that happens to you, because it feels like you can never plan anything. You're like, I want to go on that thing, but like, how long can I sustain the energy that I need to do this? You never quite know. And then when you crash, you're just gonna have to like wait it out until you're ready to get going again. And so those really dramatic ups and downs are really stressful, and they're not fun to experience. And it can make you feel like you're always missing out. Like, you never get to do the things that you really want to do. And so for me, this really came to a head in 2009 when I burned out really badly. And I had to rest a lot. I had to do very, very little. And I got overstimulated at the smallest thing. And so suddenly my sensation seeker side felt like she was put in prison. She couldn't do any of the things that she wanted to do. And my highly sensitive side really came to the fore and was like, we just need to rest, we need to calm down, we need this. And that was hard. It was hard to make peace with that. But what I learned through a process that I developed is how to balance the highs and the lows, so that instead of it being this really dramatic up, 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 and then dramatic crash, it becomes a little up and a little down, little up, little down, little waves of activity and engagement. And that's really important for people who are both, who have that high sensitivity and the sensation seeker side. You want to learn how to be able to have that extroverted, adventurous, novelty-seeking part of you get what she wants, or he, and at the same time build in enough rest and downtime so that you don't get overstimulated, and then finding where that balance lies for you. Yeah, so this is a really common pattern for people who are highly sensitive and they're sensation seekers, is they have these massive ups where they go and do all the things and then they crash and they have to hide away and they look depressed to the outside world. And it's really hard when you're trying, in your social life especially, when you're trying to communicate with people that you would really love to go to the party, you would really love to go do all these things, but at the same time, you know that you can't right now because you need to kind of calm your nervous system. It really sounds to other people like you're just going through depression. And so what a lot of your extroverted friends are going to do is they're going to try and drag you along with them and be like, oh, come on and get over it, and like, just come and have fun, you'll feel better. But when you have both that sensitivity and that sensation seeking side, like, you need downtime, you need time to process, but you also need to have those adventures. And it's not either or. Sometimes people wonder whether they're one or the other. It's like, am I this one version of, is my true self the sensitive one, or is my true self the extroverted, adventurous one? And the answer is you're both. But it can express itself differently over time. So you could, hello? We've got a cat peeking in from outside through the door, like, okay, that's really funny. But you've got both, so you need both and you want both, and they're both part of you, but they can express themselves differently over time. If you're around a lot of extroverted people who really applaud you for being extroverted and adventurous and trying things, then you might really amp that part of you up. And at the same time, if you're around a lot of extroverted people and you feel like they're too much, you might actually lean into your introverted, highly sensitive side more to try to balance out the dynamics. So you could end up being dragged more into one side of you because of how other people are and kind of going along with them. But you can also end up kind of like putting on the brakes so that you see if people are very introverted or very extroverted, you're going to be the opposite in that dynamic to kind of try and balance out the situation. And that sounds a little bit strange, like, why would you balance things out? But this happens especially in a family dynamic. If you have family members who are all super extroverted and super go, 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 it might feel like you have to really lean into your sensitive side, because just the fact that all those people are doing so much is already overstimulating, right? Whereas if you're in a family where everyone is very introverted and keeping things very quiet on the down low and just not really seeking any new experiences, you can feel stifled and stuck, and you can kind of try to drag people out of that all the time and really lean into your sensation-seeking side. So many people who are highly sensitive and a sensation seeker have this experience where they grew up kind of leaning into one side more than the other, depending on what the people around them were doing and also what they were applauded for, what they were feeling appreciated for, what they believed was their right side that was okay to be, and what was like their wrong side that they needed to suppress. But ultimately, you want both. And for you to be a happy, sensitive person, you need to have that downtime and that quiet and that structure that lets your nervous system settle, but you also need to have these opportunities for growth and newness and exploring. Now, I wanted to do a video on this because this is a very rare trait. Not a lot of people have this. And mostly when you hear about people talking about high sensitivity online, you're going to be hearing about the introverted, highly sensitive person who is just like, I'm overstimulated, get away from me, I want time away from everything. And so if you're not that kind of person, if you're like, but I want to go travel and I want to go to all these parties and I want to do all these new things and I want to be an entrepreneur, and it can feel a little bit alienating, like, are you even highly sensitive? Like, because it doesn't feel like you fit in with a lot of these other people in this kind of highly sensitive group. And it is different. It is different when you have both. And it is harder because you do need to really manage that fine line. And it's really hard to do that because chances are that you've never received a framework to understand yourself and to understand what it means to be both and how you can honor both without feeling too bored and without feeling too overstimulated. So back in 2009 when I burned out, I had to learn a ton of things in that period. And so you'll hear me referring to that time, in various videos and various articles. It's like, and then I burned out, and then I had to learn these things. And the stories that I had to learn will be different depending on the topic, because I had to learn a whole bunch of things basically at the same time. And if I try to give you the whole thing in one go, it's just going to be super confusing. So I usually explain it as, I'm talking about this topic now. 2009, I burned out. This is what I had to learn. And so this is one of the things I really had to learn. It's like, how do I satisfy this part of me that wants adventure and wants to do things and go out just into the world, try new things. How do I balance that with this part of me that's completely exhausted and pooped out and just can't? It's like, I can't even. And that was really hard because I was kind of like a massive lockdown situation where I was just spending a lot of time at home, a lot of time away from people, a lot of time to rest and recover. And then there was this part of me was like, but I want to do these things, and finding things that part of me could do that were within my highly sensitive limits. It was hard at first, but it also forced me to develop a way to do that, a way to understand the sensitivity side and the extroverted adventure-seeking side, and like how they operate and how I could manage both. And as I slowly came out of my burnout, the system that I developed to balance both of these is something that I've taken with me. I still use that system. I still use that approach. I use it to plan. I use it to plan what I can do and what I can't do. I use it to plan how I'm going to go about a big project so that I don't get stressed out, but I'm having fun doing something new. I use it to anticipate when is the best time to do things. And if I'm going to do something at a particular time, something really big, something potentially overwhelming, how do I make sure that my sensitive side doesn't get burned out? So I've ended up developing a whole system for that, whole detailed system. It took me several years to fully kind of flesh that out. But this is something that I teach highly sensitive people now. Not in these videos, because I need to talk to you one-on-one, get to know you, kind of show you the ropes. But this is something I work with. I work on this with clients, and really kind of create their own, I call happy sensitive foundations. Create your own foundations, and those are really great if even if you're not a sensitive sensation seeker, but you're really overwhelmed and stressed out and burned out. Though it's the same principle, it's the same system, it's the same techniques that I will teach you, because you need to kind of know where your boundaries are, your own boundaries based on what is true for you, and not your boundaries based on what other people think you should be doing. That's a totally different thing. And that's often where we get stuck, right? We're like, I should be able to do that because this other person I know thinks I should be able to, or they're able to. And so that building those boundaries from the inside out, getting to know your own limits, and getting to know how stress builds up over time, and also how boredom builds up over time. And learning to spot them early so that you can intervene and you can do something and you can rebalance. A really big thing for highly sensitive sensation seekers is balance. You need to constantly balance. You have these two sides of you that want different things, and so they're constantly going to potentially topple you over depending on which side of you is strongest and is most accepted within you, right? So if you've really accepted your sensitive side, you can end up living a really boring life that it doesn't feel satisfying, because you're like, okay, I'm not overstimulated, I'm calm, but I'm just bored out of my mind. But you may not realize. You may just feel depressed and not know why. And you're like, but I'm doing everything right. I'm making sure that I'm not overstimulated. I had a client I worked on this with who was really, at first we had to work on the overstimulation, right? That's usually where you start. That's usually where people get stuck. They're like, it's too much and I'm not feeling good. So we worked on the overstimulation. But then he got to a point where he was being so good at doing one thing at a time and just being really calm and deliberate, and he got really bored, but he didn't realize. And he was like, I'm feeling really stuck, and I'm doing all the things you showed me, and I'm really kind of like lowering my stress levels, but I still don't feel good. I feel depressed. And I realized, like, he was hitting that point where he was starting to go from calm into boredom, right? So this is different for everyone, and boredom is tricky because sometimes when you're overstimulated, trying to slow down at all, it's going to feel boring. And boring is just kind of a signal from your body saying, I don't want to feel this, whatever I need to feel. As you start to slow down, and I know I talk fast, but still, I'm not talking about how to talk slower. I haven't figured that one out. But I mean, kind of in your life, as you slow down and you have more time to process stuff, when you're really amped up, chances are when you kind of take some time to decompress, there's going to be feelings that surface that you don't like. And for some people, that translates as boredom. They're like, I'm bored because I want to be distracted from my feelings. So that's a very different kind of boredom from the boredom that comes from being a sensation seeker who really needs to just try and have new experiences, right? So that kind of boredom comes when you're doing all the right things, you're feeling your feelings, you're slowing down, you're taking time for things, but your life is not interesting enough. There's not enough happening in your life that really catches your attention. And so with this client, he was doing everything like deliberately, slowly, one at a time. I said, actually, you need to kind of spice things up and make it more interesting and start multitasking a little bit. Like, start doing one thing while you're doing something else. Start mixing things. Start listening to music while you do stuff. He was initially really deliberate about not doing that because he knew we could make him overstimulated, right? And that's good. But then it got to a point where just everything got too boring. So he was like, oh, so I'm allowed to like want to do all these different things? I was like, yeah, totally. It's just like finding that balance between doing these different things to make it interesting versus doing so many different things at the same time that you're just stressed out and overstimulated, which, that doesn't work. So that balance is tricky, and it's different for everyone. And it's easy to kind of delude yourself and think, I think a lot of people are going to think, oh, I am a sensation seeker because I get bored. But boredom is not exactly it, because if you're used to distracting yourself all the time and you're used to kind of seeking stimulation and, have something to listen to, have something to watch so that you don't have to deal with your feelings, that is not true boredom. That is just, I don't like how I feel and I'm going to call it boredom because I'm used to having distractions around me. Whereas sensation seeking is really about more of that interest from the inside out. Right? From the inside out, you want to learn and do new things, and you're having to manage that with, being also a very sensitive person who gets where there's just too much going on, you get stressed out. And when you're learning new things, there's always more going on than usual. So it becomes harder to predict what becomes too much and what is doable for you. So there's a lot of fine-tuning involved in that. And what I did is develop a system that allows you to do that fine-tuning and kind of do the math on what does that fine-tuning look like for you, and how can you really just map out for yourself where you're at, what your kind of like healthy balance is, and when you're out of balance. Because often we don't know. We have nothing to compare it to. You have nothing to compare your experience to, and the only thing you know is whether you feel good or not. But that's not enough to kind of help you balance this out. So if this is you, you're definitely not alone. You're not the only one, but it is quite of a different conundrum than what you will see most people talk about when they talk about highly sensitive people. All right, this is Caroline from The Happy Sensitive. Thanks so much for listening. Bye-bye.